Hello, my name is Allison Constance. I'm the Director of Pro Bono Programs at Legal Aid of North Carolina, and I want to thank you for helping us help our clients, specifically survivors of Tropical Storm Helene. We have many folks in Western North Carolina who need assistance with appealing decisions by FEMA, and we're delighted that you're here to help us and help our clients. Today, I will walk through the basics of FEMA appeals. There is an additional training that covers the basics of FEMA. Please feel free to check that out as well. Additionally, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact a member of the pro bono team. We are always here to help you and support you and make sure that you have a positive volunteer experience. Additionally, this is being recorded February 5th, 2025. It's quite possible that deadlines are extended or laws are changed after this time, so please be sure that you are using the most correct version of any documents that you're using. So I want to get started with some basics of the impact of Tropical Storm Helene. We are so grateful that many of our volunteers are from outside of North Carolina or from places in North Carolina not directly affected by the storm. For those not from North Carolina, I want to show you just how significant the impact was. All of the counties marked in a pinkish brown color are counties that received a disaster declaration and potentially the opportunity to receive federal benefits like FEMA. This is a map that obviously doesn't show topography, so I have pulled a topographical map to also show you just what these areas look like. The areas in Western North Carolina are part of the Appalachian Mountains and are quite difficult to traverse. That makes things challenging, both for survivors navigating roads after the storm. It also makes things challenging for people bringing aid and relief. And it brings separate challenges because there are a lot of privately owned roads and bridges, and that's an issue that many of our clients have seen and continue to face, figuring out how to repair those private roads and bridges. Additionally, when you think of a hurricane or a tropical storm, most people don't think of the mountains. Our coast has often been hit by big storms. But this is unprecedented for our mountain region, and that means that folks don't have the experience, weren't not necessarily prepared for the extreme level of damage that was going to come to Western North Carolina. Some state government numbers. I pulled up a report by the North Carolina Office of Management and Budget, and they're estimating, as of December 2024, that Helene has cost our state about $59.6 billion. There were over 100 deaths in North Carolina due to Tropical Storm Helene, damage to over 73,000 homes, nearly 7,000 roads and bridges, and, some residents have been cut off from outside help and communication for a very significant period of time after the storm. I do want to note, I often will say Tropical Storm Helene. That's because when Helene hit at the end of September 2024, when it hit North Carolina, it was classified as a tropical storm at that time. We often will say Hurricane Helene because it was a hurricane when it hit land in Florida and Georgia. You will often hear me say Tropical Storm Helene because that's how the storm was classified when it hit North Carolina, and that's what FEMA and other government declarations include. So we often, especially at the beginning of disaster relief, wanted to let folks know there's a timeline of disaster legal needs. With Helene, this timeline has been extremely extended. You'll see FEMA applications in the first 6 weeks. As of February 2025, the FEMA application period is still open. It's actually open right now until March 8th, 2025. We are in this period of 1 month to 6 months, but we are still seeing some of the needs that happen in the first 6 weeks. We have been told by many partners that this effort, the legal needs of people in Western North Carolina, will continue for many, many years. And that's something that we sincerely appreciate your willingness to help, your support of our program, and your support of our communities. So I am going to jump right into what FEMA assistance looks like. There are several different boxes to check on the FEMA application, different programs, different funds that provide people with some relief. The most common of those are home repair or replacement, rental assistance, vehicle repair or replacement, the coverage of medical, funeral, or dental costs, serious needs assistance. This used to be called critical needs assistance. This is the emergency fund, really from costs that were related to evacuation, and that's a $750 payout. There's also other needs assistance. The most common thing that includes is generators that folks bought immediately after the storm when there was no power in the area. So the FEMA process, as I mentioned before, the current deadline to apply for FEMA benefits is March 8th, 2025. So the folks who we're working with on appeals have already applied, but there are still people who are eligible for FEMA money who still have time to get that application in. Applications can be done in person at the disaster relief centers. There are a handful of those in the area. That is always in flux where those are. So it's possible that someone you speak with went in person to a disaster relief center, and that disaster relief center no longer exists. Those move with the demands and are always updated on FEMA's website online. Hopefully, clients have applied for FEMA benefits through the online portal. That makes appeals the easiest. That's a fairly simple website where folks can go online, submit their application, and that is best. As a lawyer, we always want to have documentation and records of things. The online portal gives us the best opportunity to have a record. There's also the opportunity to apply by phone. After the application is submitted, the home or vehicle or road, whatever it is inspected by a FEMA inspector. A lot of clients will probably be unhappy with the job this inspector did, the amount of time they were there. It is a very quick, sort of cursory process. Then a decision is made. That decision is accessible online for folks who use the portal, but also sent through the USPS mail as well. After a decision is made, there's a 60-day window to appeal. As lawyers, we always want to encourage folks to meet that deadline. I have been told many times by folks at FEMA that appeals outside of this window will still be accepted, but we want to put our clients in the best situation possible. If you happen to have a client whose 60 days have passed, continue with the appeal. If there's some reason that they're outside the window, go ahead and put that in the explanation in the appeal. But please know that it's likely that that appeal will still be processed as if it were filed within that deadline. So the appeal is often an explanation and attaching additional documents that can be submitted through the online portal. It can be done by fax or sent in the mail. Then the client will get an appeal decision sent back to the client in writing, probably a couple months between the appeal and the appeal decision. One helpful thing to know, because some of you will probably have clients who have submitted their own appeal and did it quickly because they were in a hurry, and maybe they didn't share all the evidence they could have shared to benefit their case. There is always an opportunity to submit another appeal. Whether an appeal decision has been made or not, this is not just one bite at the apple. There are multiple times, but if submitting another request or another appeal, it's important that there's new evidence. It's not just an opportunity to write what the client wrote in maybe a more organized way, unless the client wrote it in an extremely disorganized way. There needs to be new documents, new explanations, new evidence in order to warrant submitting something else. So that's the process. So we are really between 3 and 4. And hopefully, through your work, we will get through step 4 and help a client submit an appeal. As a volunteer, you will receive a referral from a client who has already been screened through our process. In order to work with Legal Aid of North Carolina, clients must meet certain income eligibility. So they've been screened with a financial screening. They will hopefully have sent us some initial documentation. Ideally, a letter explaining from FEMA what benefits they're receiving, what they've been denied for, hopefully some other documentation as well. When a referral comes to you, you will get any documents that we have and any short explanation that the client has provided in the intake process. It is your role to call the client on the phone and gather additional information. Think about, what types of, I showed you that list, and we'll talk about the individual types in a moment. What types of assistance were they looking for in that initial application? Why was it denied? What kind of evidence were they missing? Was there something that wasn't shared with FEMA? And what documents could have been provided that weren't provided already? Sometimes folks don't have a denial of claims from an insurance company. Sometimes folks need to prove ownership of their home or their vehicle. What documents can be submitted to prove ownership? And that is your job as the volunteer to help the client think that through. Then you'll prepare the appeal. There is, as of March 2024, a new appeal form, and you'll use that appeal form to submit all the client's information, or excuse me, you will not be submitting, but you'll help the client prepare that form. And that form has an opportunity to explain your reason for appeal. If the appeal is simple and it was missing, the claim was missing some simple information, you can go ahead and just write that on the appeal form and help the client attach the documents. If it's more complex, then you'll write an appeal letter and spell out exactly what FEMA needs to know in order to reconsider those claims. You'll also prepare a summary closing letter that does not go to FEMA, that is a summary letter for the client telling them next steps and explaining that their case file at Legal Aid of North Carolina will be closed. That's helpful both because it gives the client information and empowers the client to take the next steps in their case, and it also helps them to know exactly the status of their case, and it helps us for compliance purposes at Legal Aid. You'll send all of these documents to the pro bono case coordinator, along with a record of how many hours you spent on the case, because it's important for us to enter those hours into our system. After all that is done, the client will file their appeal pro se. So you are ghostwriting for the client. You do not need to put your name on any documents, aside from the summary closing letter. And you're going to prepare everything so that the client is empowered to file that appeal on their own. And all of these steps I will go through and show some examples, because I know that that's a lot, but I think it's helpful to conceptualize exactly what are you being asked to do as the volunteer here. So when you first get a case, I want to encourage you to look at the documents and go to the law. In law school, we are often taught, well, first thing you should do is look at the statute. That same thing applies here. Unfortunately, when FEMA updated a lot of their regulations in March of 2024, they did not update their individual assistance program and policy guide. This IAPPG is essentially the law. This is the statute that you are following, and you're actually really following this amendment version. If you find something in the 2021 IAPPG, it's a good idea to check the amendment version and make sure that that's still good law. Those are still the definitions used or terms used. Both of these guides are on the volunteer resources website that you've been given, where you're watching this training most likely. And we encourage you to reference this. Some of the materials that you may find by Googling are meant for the general public. They can be very helpful, but you're going to get the best, clearest information using the IAPPG. So a handful of these updates, just so you have some idea, the $750 serious needs assistance, that's that emergency evacuation money that used to be called critical needs assistance. So if you see references to critical needs assistance, it is serious needs assistance now. There are now looser restrictions on rental assistance and from whom you can rent, including staying with friends and family. The law hasn't necessarily changed here, but it's been written down and FEMA has made an affirmative statement that if your home was not properly maintained pre-disaster, that does not preclude you from receiving home repair assistance from FEMA. Damage from the storm is still covered by FEMA, even if your home was not properly maintained. That's not always the case with insurance companies, and so that can be really helpful to some of our clients. FEMA can also now help with mold issues. We're seeing mold issues in a lot of our cases, so this is something for many of you to be aware of. Additionally, if your client has a disability that requires some sort of accommodation in their home, I think the easiest example to conceptualize might be a ramp. If your client needed a ramp but didn't have a ramp before the storm hit, FEMA assistance can now be used to cover some disability accommodations even though the home that was damaged didn't have them before the storm. Some of these things are, relatively new, less than a year old. They are not kind of tried and tested. So we will see how these changes in the law play out. But all in all, changes that were made were positive changes to help our clients. So I'm going to start with each individual type of assistance just to flag a few things to look for. With serious needs assistance, this is that evacuation immediate need coverage. This could be denied if in the client's application they didn't report that they were displaced or they didn't report that they had serious needs. It's hard to know in the application when FEMA is asking certain questions, why they're asking them or what exactly they mean by them. So it's possible that someone said they weren't displaced because they, just had to go to their sister's house an hour away, but they actually were displaced and did have serious needs. Appeals can be done by sending proof of expenses, whether they had to, buy water, extra food bills for food that was destroyed during the storm, their hotel bill, things like that. As we get farther and farther away from the date of the storm, serious needs assistance will be harder to get. But that doesn't mean if the client has a really good explanation or information that wasn't shared before, then they shouldn't try the appeal. The next is vehicle assistance. Vehicle assistance can be tricky because it requires significant documentation. You'll need the vehicle to be licensed and registered and documentation of those things. The client must be the owner, and the damage and repairs must be documented. Vehicle assistance can only be used for one vehicle. So FEMA will only pay for one vehicle unless the client can prove that there's another member of the household that, maybe works in a different direction and that having two vehicles is essential for the home. Whenever we're looking at FEMA claims, it's helpful to think about what is essential. If that is essential rooms in a home, if there are three people living in a 4-bedroom home, all 4 bedrooms are not going to be considered essential rooms, for example. And FEMA has charts and calculations for all of those things. The next thing is rental assistance. The client's home needs to have been uninhabitable due to the disaster. So if someone was renting a home that is no longer safe to live in, then they can apply for rental assistance. They cannot have been homeless at the time of the storm or evicted right before the storm. Like home repair, an inspector determines habitability, but there can be some other pieces of evidence that can help beyond a FEMA inspector's inspection. Perhaps, the landlord from whom they've been renting writes a letter saying, I cannot rent this place out because it's uninhabitable. Here are all the problems with it. That letter from a landlord can go a long way. The FEMA rental rate is calculated based on the certain location it's in. It's 200% of the HUD fair market value. So there is a specific amount that is provided for rental assistance. There are a few different types, and a few different types ranging in length as well. Folks can get continuing rental assistance up to a year and a half after the disaster, but that has to be something that people financially qualify for. And those are only for folks who are low income. If you have a case with rental assistance, we do not have many of those, but I would encourage you to dive a little deeper into all of these pieces. This is kind of a brief overview to give you enough background to get you started. Home repair assistance is something for which we receive a lot of claims. The home has to be uninhabitable. And it's very important to think about, what does that mean? What is unsafe? What can be harmful? And, that might be where you have to brainstorm with the client about what can be shown to prove that the home is not habitable. The applicant must also own the home. That definition is a lot broader for FEMA than it used to be. So that could be a co-owner. If it's heir property and someone lives in the home that was owned by their grandparent many, many years ago, and they've been living there and paying taxes and maintaining that property, then they could still be considered the owner. Anyone acting as an owner will be considered the owner. It's important to ensure that folks do have some documentation of that. For example, whether they pay the tax bill, they're paying the mortgage, they can show the deed, but they do need to own the home. The next thing I'll mention, I'm not sure that we'll have any of these in our appeals, but if your client mentions having an issue with accessing their property because of a private road or bridge, this is something that I would love for you to flag for us, and we can take that case back to our firm at Legal Aid of North Carolina and have someone work on it. FEMA does assist with privately owned roads and bridges. It's part of the home repair assistance. Unfortunately, there's a cap to how much home repair assistance someone can get, and that includes assistance with helping to restore roads and bridges as well. That's also something where everyone with a claim to the road would have to apply, and then the assistance would be split. Again, if a client mentions this, please let us know, and we would love to talk with them more about it. Um, I'll briefly mention household duplication. I don't think that this will be an issue for most of our pro bono cases, but it's important to know that only one member of the household can receive benefits for the same purpose. There may be an issue with roommates or someone who's not technically part of the same household, but let's say you have a grown child and a parent living in the same house, both acting as co-owners. Only one of those people can apply for benefits. So a lot of concerns that we get from clients are that FEMA has not granted them enough relief. It is important to conceptualize that the goal of FEMA funding is to help make something habitable or functional. What is habitable or functional is not necessarily returning something to pre-disaster condition. Um, FEMA funds will never be enough to make someone whole, to make someone's house as good as it was before the disaster. But it's also helpful to listen to someone and make sure that, FEMA hasn't made a mistake. There are a lot of applications coming through. They're being processed by people. The inspectors are people, and sometimes mistakes happen. If you're in a situation where you see something that might be a little bit strange, it may be that we need to reach out to FEMA. We might have the client call FEMA to ask for more details, to get more information than is actually listed on their denial letter. For folks who are unhappy with what they've gotten from FEMA, I do encourage you to let them know that there may be additional resources as well. If you have questions about those resources, I am more than happy to check and see what's available. These resources change constantly, especially potential state government resources. I know that a lot of that is in the works constantly right now. So please feel free to reach out to me, to the case coordinator who's managing the case, to see if there are resources that we can help suggest for your client. As you're going through this process, it's very important to manage client expectations. It is valuable to say to the client, that seems so frustrating. I cannot imagine how difficult it has been to go through this. It is not helpful to the client to say, FEMA must have made a mistake here. I'm going to get this fixed for you, because we don't know for sure. It's possible that you might review a case and meet with a client where an appeal is not necessarily warranted, where it looks like they've given FEMA all the evidence, a decision was made, the client's not happy with that decision, but there's not really anything else that can be shared with FEMA or argued. And in that situation, it's okay to advise the client that an appeal isn't necessarily going to be worth their time or their energy. That's not a fun message to deliver, but it's very helpful to manage client expectations, to remind them that FEMA is not meant to make them whole. FEMA is not meant to completely cover all of their losses. Very few people have flood insurance in the areas that were affected by Helene, because there is not often flooding in the areas affected by Helene. This is a particular challenge for a lot of people and a very unfortunate reality. But please do think about how you're sharing this information with clients and think about what you can say to help clients understand what to expect from FEMA and what not to expect from FEMA. So we're going to jump to some practical things right now, and that is looking at the appeal form. This form was created by FEMA when they changed some laws in March of 2024. You will notice on this form that the expiration date says 9/30/2024. This is the most current form. If there is an updated form, we will update it on the Volunteer Resources webpage. Right now, we have been told that this is the most updated form and it has not expired in spite of what it says in the corner. The beginning of the form is a Privacy Act statement, and then you'll see on the form that it provides the three options. Here's what you do with this form. You can upload it to your online portal at disasterassistance.gov. You can fax it to FEMA, or you can mail it to FEMA. There's a section below, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit fuzzy. You will put in the client's information. You'll put in their application number. You'll put in the disaster number. I can make sure you have that number. You'll put in the applicant name, the phone number, and their addresses. So basic information. This form is fillable and you can help the client fill it out. I would make sure that, excuse me, the number and the application number is correct. Make sure the spelling of the name is correct because we don't want any little mistakes to cause any delays for our clients. Also, on the back of this form is a large block that says explanation or reason for appeal. Please explain the portion of FEMA's decision you disagree with and why. If applicable, please explain how your documentation supports your appeal request. Note, additional pages may be attached. So with this section, if you have a relatively straightforward appeal, documentation wasn't provided, you have additional documentation the client can now provide, you can write a simple explanation in this block. If things are a little bit more complicated, your client's case might benefit from an attached letter, please do so. I would encourage you to still fill out this form because FEMA has a lot of stuff going on and it's helpful. They've provided a form, we're going to use it, but you can write in this blank, see attached letter. And then you can write a letter to go alongside with this form, put it all together as a PDF with any documentation. You'll notice at the bottom, there is a place for the applicant's signature. This can be an electronic signature. You can work with the client to figure out what makes the most sense for them. If it's helpful for you to send them something by DocuSign, we do have a system at Legal Aid that we'd be happy to help send to them to allow them to sign it. But know that an electronic signature is okay. If the client is uncomfortable with that and would really prefer to use wet ink, that's completely fine. We'd be happy to put this in the mail for them if that would make things easier for you, or you are welcome to mail it to them as well. If you are attaching a letter, there's a template on the Volunteer Resources webpage. Looking at this template, you'll see there are a bunch of yellow spots. This is really to personalize for your client situation. If your client is uploading by the portal, you can delete these other things. You want to put in their registration number. I have gone ahead and put the disaster number in here. This is the disaster number that you will use on that appeal form as well. You'll put your argument. I want to stress that this FEMA appeal letter is not something that requires a certain style or format. You are not writing an appellate brief where there's a style guide. The goal here is to make things as clear as possible. Put yourself in the shoes of someone at FEMA who is reviewing claims, and they are reviewing, I don't know how many claims per day, a lot. They're tired. They are working as carefully as they can, but also trying to get a large number of things reviewed in a day. So if that means putting headers, using bold, using numbers, whatever you can do to make the argument as organized and clear as possible, go ahead and do. If it makes sense to insert pictures right within this letter, go for it. There is no style guide. Do what you think someone who is reviewing a lot of appeals and a lot of claims would respond to the best. That's really the substantive heart of what we're talking about. But I do want to take a step back and remind folks, especially if you don't have uh, a role or a day-to-day practice where you're interacting with people in difficult and vulnerable situations, working with survivors of disasters is a privilege and can be a challenge at a time. Um, Survivors of disasters have, for the most part, this is a broad generalization, have gone through a long, frustrating, and potentially traumatic process. We're just one small part of that process. They've already been denied from FEMA, or they haven't gotten what they expected to get from FEMA. And it's possible that they've been denied other relief from insurance, from other organizations. Some folks may have lost their livelihoods. Some folks may have lost employment. Some folks may have lost friends or loved ones because of the storm. So know that if a client is frustrated with you, it is often the case that a client is frustrated with the process because it's been a long, difficult road, and it's probably going to continue to be a long and difficult road. Additionally, I just want to remind everyone, while you may know the law or at least feel comfortable enough with the law to be working on their case, the client is the expert of their own story. It's very important to listen carefully to what the client says, to not put words in their mouth, to really gather as much information from the client as possible because no one knows their story as well as they do. Additionally, trauma responses will look different for everyone. For some people, going through a traumatic experience makes them shut down, feel cold, seem emotionless. For others, it's a completely opposite response. So I would encourage you to not have specific expectations of what your client should be reacting to or how your client should be acting about a particular situation. For some folks, going through a traumatic event means that they're struggling to stay organized, they're struggling to stay on top of things. And that may be a reason for their, not submitting a document when they first applied. So keep that in mind as you're working with a client. And finally, be careful with assumptions. Be careful with assumptions about a client's situation, a client's experience, a client's ability. Some of you will have clients who have strong Southern accents. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are uneducated or that they, don't understand their situation. Some clients may have lots of experience and access to phones and computers and be able to work with the portal. Other clients may not feel comfortable with the online portal. I would really keep an open mind and not make any assumptions about what your client will or will not be able to do based on the limited information that we start with about them. So to that end, it's helpful to ask clients, do you have access where you can upload something to an online portal? Do you have the ability to take documents that were sent to you in an email and download them and move them into a portal. Some folks may access the internet from a phone and struggle with attachments or things like that. So it's always helpful to ask folks, what can they do? What do they want to do? What are they comfortable with? And that will really help you be a good advocate and help the client ultimately have a better shot at getting some relief from FEMA. Finally, I want to encourage everyone that you're more than welcome to ask for help. On the left side of the screen is Lauren Ashley Redmond. She is a specific pro bono disaster relief attorney with us at Legal Aid of North Carolina, and she's available to help troubleshoot, to answer questions. I am also available. You're more than welcome to email me. You might get a quicker response with Laura and Ashley, but you're always welcome to email me. I can't promise that either of us will know the answer immediately, but we will do our best to find it. And we have resources and other people at Legal Aid who we can work with to find an answer for you. So please don't struggle alone on an issue. We are here to help. We want to support you and guide you through this process. Finally, I want to thank you so much for all that you're doing. By being willing to work with our clients, you are really providing a tremendous service. As I've mentioned, our clients have been through a lot, experiencing Tropical Storm Helene, experiencing a tremendous amount of destruction to Western North Carolina, and you are not only working with them to hopefully get them some financial relief, you are giving them your time, you're giving them a listening ear, and giving them the peace of mind that they're going to submit an appeal that is prepared as best as it could be. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that this volunteer experience is a positive one for you, and I hope that you'll continue to work with us. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing all the great work.